Welcome, Hop Nation. Today I have a special guest in Dan Weinfurter. I'm going to read Dan's bio because this is really impressive. Dan and I have known each other for a few years now. Dan's been on my advisory board when I had Grandesco College, and we've stayed in contact, and we're doing some stuff now here in North America around sales and the work he's doing with Mentor Group. But Dan's been a builder of businesses. As an author, motivational speaker, and serial entrepreneur, he brings over 25 years of wisdom and experience creating successful companies with him wherever he goes. Dan excels at helping companies achieve more rapid organizational growth by focusing on improving sales process. He firmly believes that investing time and effort to improving effectiveness by recruiting the right people for critical roles and coaching superior team that's aligned, engaged, and committed to success will pay dividends. As the founder and CEO of 3 private equity-backed businesses, Dan has provided consulting and interim management to a variety of startups and large public companies. His favorite phrase is grow or die. Dan Weinfurter is currently director for Mentor Group UK, running all the North American operations. Mentor's a global technology-enabled services firm that delivers solutions that provide dramatic improvements in sales productivity and revenue growth. Prior to running his own boutique consultancy, Dan was the founder and CEO of Growth Play LLC, an integrated sales effectiveness and service business. And Growth Play rapidly grew from startup in 2014 to 140 people in 6 physical offices in 2017. The company achieved the #1 overall ranking in the business products and services categories by Inc. 500 that year. He's also been part of other companies that have been ranked #1 on the Inc. 500 magazine company. And in October 2000, Parson Group was ranked #1 on the magazine for October 2000. His book, Second Stage Entrepreneurship, 10 Proven Strategies for Driving Aggressive Growth, is a useful guide for any entrepreneur making the transition from startup to sustainable growth. It was published in 2011 by Macmillan Palgrave. Dan is widowed with 2 grown daughters. He splits his time between Chicago, Illinois, Belgium, Wisconsin, and Delray Beach, Florida. When he's not traveling and working, you might find him on his bicycle riding up and down the Chicago lakefront, or AIA in South Florida, or pedaling through the tranquil Wisconsin countryside. So that is Dan. Welcome, Dan.
That was quite an intro. Thank you, Corey.
Yeah, and like I said, your bio and everything that can be said is lengthy, and that's just a synopsis. So tell us a bit about your founder's story and where you developed this passion for business and sales-driven growth.
You know, it's sort of an evolution. I started my career hired out of college into GE's sales training program. So my roots in the world of selling and sales go all the way back to when I got out of college. But even before that, I had a paper route when I was 12, and I had to sell subscriptions. And I worked in a bookstore from age 16 till when I graduated from college. So I sold books and other sorts of things that you have at a bookstore. So selling has been part of my life. My view of selling is not what many people think. It's more related to, well, how do you help people get what they want? How do you help them be successful? And if you can do that, that is my view of the world of selling. That translated to this whole world of growing a company. I mean, it's sort of born out of a point of pain. At one particular company, we were in a board meeting, and one of the board members was a Harvard Business School professor who just sat there quietly during the meeting as we described some of the issues we had in one of our markets. And then after everybody was done, he starts in sort of with his list of questions that he knew all the answers to. How big is the company? What do you do? How many offices? How many people? And then he just shook his head and he just said, you know, Dan, I mean, I don't really get it. This is a small company. I mean, really, how hard can it be? And that sort of was a slap across the face, if you will, that caused me to say, okay, it's a hell of a lot harder to do this than you think, Mr. College Professor. So at that point, we committed ourselves to writing it down and really became a student of this whole notion of driving organic, profitable growth. And that was, 2000 maybe. So it's been going on for about 20 years now since that point.
Right. And I think that particular case study you're talking about, when you got involved, it was about 3 million a year sales, and you grew it to over 100 million.
It's actually the company after that, but
okay.
My first entrepreneurial experience was 3 to 100 and took it public. So
yeah,
I had my share of things that went well there and things that didn't go perfectly there as well. Like anything, when things don't go well, it tends to be a good teacher. So you learn, unfortunately, more from things that are a little bit sideways than from things that are perfect.
Yeah. Well, the expression I love and gravitate to is, it's not failure, it's a learning lesson. And as long as you don't repeat the learning lesson, then that's probably a good thing.
Yeah, I had a board member once that the same company, same board, different board member. So Dan, the first fall down the flight of stairs is a given. The second fall down the same flight of stairs is irritating, but I can still understand it. But the third fall down that very same flight of stairs, that really pisses me off. Kind of knew what he was talking about.
I can resonate with that. I like that. He sounds like he would have been a pretty interesting board member.
It was actually Don Perkins, who was a legendary board member. He served on the boards of at least 7 or 8 Fortune 100 companies. He was a really terrific mentor and great person to me.
Oh, that's excellent. Excellent. So one of the things that I've gleaned from you personally is this expertise and background you've developed in private equity backed businesses, and the role that's played in helping you drive some growth organically. Tell me a bit about that, because there's not a lot of business people that can sit and say that they've done, a private equity backed business, let alone the number you have.
Yeah, I mean,
what's different about that?
Not everybody loves private equity firms. There's certainly all of the stories about a private equity firm acquiring a business, levering it up, and then firing all the people and putting the company into the ditch. That's not my experience, however. My experience is with private equity firms that provide needed capital to allow you to put investment out ahead of revenue to drive rapid growth. And for my mentality, trying to grow a business without capital is doable, but it's really difficult.
It extends the time for that growth that you're moving into. Yeah.
The thing that you have to understand with private equity firms is that the day that you get the equity investment, the clock starts. And time is not your friend. No. So you need to move quickly and productively to put the investments in and then make sure that you get the return. Because every year that goes by without a realization for the private equity firm, the hurdle for the management team, in effect, increases. And there's interest on that money, and the return is divided over the number of years. And so there is an impetus on the management team to really get focused on how quickly we can do this, to put that curve as high as possible, but subject to the constraints of what level of profitability is necessary or what level of loss is tolerable. I've been in both models. And then making sure that you do it quickly. And every day and everything you do is measured, and it is a very different environment than someone who owns his or her business and can grow it at whatever speed that they deem appropriate, without necessarily scrutiny and oversight from people who are highly critical and frankly only really care about the numbers. They may say they EBIDTA. Yeah, but they don't really truly care about anything other than financial results. So you do need to understand that when you have a private equity investor.
Absolutely. And, I've shared with you, one of the companies I did a lot of leadership development training was a private equity backed chain of casinos. And they're, I know what the pressures were on them and what the leadership and the rev dev was all about. And, the CEO would EBIDTA. Everyone gets up there, and that's not because that's his love interest. It was because that protects his job, but it's a pretty good driver of any business. But it's the pressure too from above. Like, you are accountable.
Yeah, what people need to really figure out, though, and understand both, I'm not sure I can ever convince the private equity firms of this, but certainly the executive teams, is that the EBITDA is the output, and you can't actually do anything to change EBITDA other than through how you manage the inputs. And so while the output is measured daily or weekly or quarterly, what really management needs to focus on are what are the inputs that are ultimately going to do the things necessary to have the positive result that everybody wants to see.
Right. And I always found that interesting myself because, well, in my PhD research looked at this because EBITDA and profit is a lag measure, and one of the later lag measures. So in an environment where you have to move quickly, having that as one of your top 3 priorities as a lag measure doesn't seem right. But it's the activities and tapping into the drivers, and part of that's obviously the sales. That's the biggest one. If you don't have the top line, everything below that, your burn rate, your growth projections, that go away. It's driven by the top line and sales. It's literally the first thing on any financial statement.
Yeah, and EBITDA could be exactly the wrong thing to do as well if you're trying to also drive growth. So there are plenty of scenarios where the right thing to do is to take EBITDA lower in order to have a positive outcome down the road. Some PE firms are fine with that and they'll be supportive of management teams. There are others that won't ever let that happen. It can't ever go down.
Right. So the idea fit, for your company and culture.
Exactly.
Excellent. Now, one of the things you've done, in addition to your book, let's go to the book, Second Stage Entrepreneurship. So you had a bunch of early successes as an entrepreneur. You wrote the book. Tell us a bit about the book, Second Stage Entrepreneurship.
Well, the book, actually, the idea for the book came out of that infamous board meeting that I talked about where the professor said, how hard can it be? And so that's when I decided, I guess, to write down what I thought were the principles that were responsible for growth. Mm-hmm. It was a long time between that particular board meeting and when the book came out. I actually kept thinking about it from the year 2000 all the way up to 2012, but I didn't actually act on it. I was busy running companies and I had a lot of other things going on. I had a young family, so it just was sort of mothballed. But in 2012, I had seen enough of the world to see that, well, these businesses that have promise, that are early stage, they seem to get stuck. And it's a difficult transition to go from, let's say it's a restaurant. This is a simple example. To go from one restaurant, making that work, to making 5 work. That's a whole different skill set.
Absolutely.
Those examples are numerous in industry where the founder controls everything, but in order to scale, they have to put a team in place who then control all the various aspects. And that's not something most founders are good at. What really makes them brilliant in the early stages, controlling everything, and that's a death knell if you're trying to scale a business. And so the book was designed to set forth principles or strategies that are important to drive a business from proof of concept to something that can scale, that has a team, and ultimately becomes a big business with predictable revenue. And so I started writing it in 2012, and it was published at the end of 2013 by Macmillan. So it was a labor of love, if you will.
I fully understand as someone who's now got pressure to finish mine. So I can appreciate that. Now, you brought up the word human scalability in that, and you had a great Venn diagram in the book. And if I can, I'm going to try and share it, as an add-on when we go to editing for this podcast from the book. But I know you had also developed a course for Kellogg's School of Business on human scalability. Tell me a bit about that course and what that was like, because I know I value evidence-based management and practice and the contribution that academia can bring to informing practice. But there's a huge gap between academia and the practitioners. And I love when a practical person can get in and teach at, highly regarded university as a pracademic. I've actually applied for the trademark on that term, pracademic, because I think there's value in both, but there's this gap. And, one of my life missions is probably to bridge that. But tell me about the Human Scalability course.
So when you write a book, of course, you have to get endorsements for the book that they can put on the book jacket. So the publishers don't really help you do that anymore. It's up to the author to find that
Right.
the people who are willing to read the book and have their name on the book jacket. So one of the people I sent it to was the person I knew at Kellogg who ran the Entrepreneurship program. Luckily for me, she really liked the book and came back and said something to the effect, there's plenty of books on how to execute a startup, and there's thousands of books on how to be successful when you're running a large organization. But there's not anything that she knew of that talked about the gap from early stage proof of concept to what I'd call second stage. And so she wrote a really terrific endorsement that's on the book jacket, and then called me and said, hey, Dan, would you be willing to turn part of this into a course that we could offer to the full-time Kellogg MBA students? And at that point, not knowing what level of work was involved, I said, sure, I'd be happy to do that.
Sucker.
And so I created a course called Human Capital and Enterprise Scaling.
Yes.
And it was a course designed to teach MBA students how do you put in place the organizational infrastructure, the culture, the management processes that allow the business to scale from a human capital perspective. And so that's what the course was about, and I taught that for 2 years. It was wildly rewarding and very challenging.
Yeah. Did it make you speak differently in boardrooms like the Harvard professor?
No, I think it was one and the same. What I found in the students is that there were some that were highly engaged and some where they were just, they didn't really know what they had signed up for. And this course was probably something that they would never actually have to put into practice. So I had both types. But obviously, a place like Kellogg, you have a lot of really smart young people.
Absolutely. I mean, that's one of the top ones in the world, So you've done all these things up till now. You have a book, you're speaking training. You've now taken this role with a UK-based firm called Mentor Group. Tell me a bit about that path and, what you're doing there and then we'll talk about what's, the next phase of Dan Weinfurter.
I met the folks from Mentor when I was running Growth Play, and it's a UK-based business that is in the sales productivity improvement space, if you will. I mean, I think this is probably as clear as you can cut it. They help improve the per capita effectiveness of people that are doing primarily business-to-business selling. They do work all over the world. They have an unbelievable list of marquee name brand clients that they do work for everywhere. And so when I ended up leaving what I was doing previous, I called up the two owners and said, would you like to take your starting point and build us into a much, much bigger business? And if you're up for it, I am as well. And so the first part of this journey is me helping them set up a presence in North America. And that's both a sales capability and a delivery capability. So for the last year and 2 months, I really started a year ago, February, I've been putting that network in place. We are cultivating a nice list of additional clients. We've established a private equity, or what we call a financial sponsor business, which is to help firms, the portfolio company of private equity firms, improve their capability at rolling out sales and sales productivity improvements. And so it's been a great 12, 14-month project so far. I think the best is still ahead as we get some institutional funding and really accelerate the growth of this particular business.
Absolutely. And for those listeners, full disclosure, I'm involved with Mentor Group along with Kirk and, taking more and more of a role here, especially in Canada, as representatives for the Canadian sales and the North American delivery. And, I've worked with a number of other channel partners before and people in this space, but mentor and the group of people that you and Chris and John have put together is world class. And I believe there's over 250, consultants worldwide operating in like 68 countries.
Yeah, it's good. It's for the company at the size that it is. It punches way above its weight class, as the saying goes. We do work for really impressive businesses all over the world.
Absolutely. And I know some of the play going on behind the scenes, and pay attention to the company Mentor Group. If you haven't heard about it yet, you will be hearing about it over the next few years, because with a guy like Dan behind this and the two, guys that I've got to know here in the past little bit, and Chris and Jim in the UK, I mean, it's a company on the move and doing some things very strategically that, we've done a lot of alignment and almost straddled our horse with Mentor at this stage because of the quality of work and that, and our own ability to scale with the company. So
even in this world of coronavirus, we're pretty busy. We're obviously not doing very many face-to-face activities, but we have a nice technology that's been in place now for a year and a half. And the development, we've cracked the code, I think, in a pretty meaningful way on what we call virtual instructor-led training, which is taking what works well in a face-to-face scenario and moving it to a virtual world. So,
absolutely.
but it works.
And you're taking a major leadership role, and now there's an attraction capacity that's coming on this whole move now with B2B sales on the social selling side, because the model of sales has changed in this environment, and Mentor has been doing stuff like this for a while and is seeing a lot of traction. So kudos on you and the team there.
Well, thanks. It's been fun.
Yeah. So in terms of sales and biz dev, we're hearing, it's a bit of a new world that we're operating in right now. It's unprecedented. There's no doubt with coronavirus, but I think even when that's behind us, the shift in how we're working in that and the ways of doing it and the efficiencies, and effectiveness of the virtual instructor-led training, that's going to change the training and consulting world as well. But also the sales side, where do you see sales? What's going to stay the same and what will be different, say, over the next decade?
That's
really a big question.
I wish I was smart enough to know the answer to that question. If I could absolutely predict with certainty where it's going to go.
Yeah, you have to rub the crystal ball.
Yeah. So first, maybe in training. So we look at our business, and a year ago we were 70% face-to-face and 30% virtual. Today, at the time this is recorded, we're 100% virtual and 0 face-to-face. How will that change when people can get back on planes? We don't know for sure, but it may be that the ratio is flipped, or maybe it goes to 50-50. There's still a huge benefit that is derived from putting people together in a room and all the social interaction that comes from that. So I don't believe that will go away. And I often have said Americans have short memories, and in this case, I'll say North Americans have short memories.
Yeah.
So once a vaccine is found and there is some return to normalcy, some of the behaviors that have governed business for years, I think, will return. But it won't be like it was before. In the world of selling, there's already been a big change where a lot of sales roles that used to be face-to-face have been put to business development reps or inside sales. And many, what I'd call transaction-oriented sales that used to be face-to-face no longer are. So that will continue or accelerate, but there are still many face-to-face roles that are consultative where they're team decision-making guidelines. And so I think a fair amount of that will remain face-to-face, but there could very well be a scenario where more of the meetings in a process are done virtually. as opposed to today where you might have on a really complicated deal 5 or 10 face-to-face meetings with a client, and the client may have 11 different people who are involved, and so the meetings involve a lot of people coming together to make a decision. But what's the exact ratio and timeline? I don't know. I just don't believe that face-to-face will go away. I think there'll still be some component of that. And even something like a board meeting, which, theoretically you can do a board meeting virtually. And I've been part of many virtual board meetings, but they're nowhere near as good as a face-to-face interaction if you can pull it off. Certainly a virtual board meeting is better than not doing one at all. But that all said, people may come to a different point of view, and that save the time involved for getting 12 people on a plane to come to a common location, and let's just put it together virtually. I don't know.
Well, I think the efficiencies and cost savings now have been opened up or exposed in some, where a lot of the training that we would typically deliver would be large events where companies bringing in, hundreds, if not thousands of people for training. There's a big extended team. You have all those airfares, all those hotels. You have all the days away from the office, before and after the event. And
there might be a little bit of money involved for alcohol, maybe.
They're probably, I've heard a rumor that happens. I cannot confirm or deny. Now, I know Mentor Group was looking at this in terms of one of the skill sets and things that they're being called on for is converting things that were face-to-face training, delivery, onboarding to virtual instructor-led training, in this new model. And I think the number, correct me if I'm wrong, Dan, was about 1.3 times longer, for delivery virtual, because when we're face-to-face, you can hear different things and things can happen quicker face-to-face, similar to a board meeting, right? Where there's literally only one person can talk at a time, basically, when it's virtual versus interactive, unless you have the breakout rooms. But that 1.3 times, and is that accurate?
That's accurate. Our research would suggest that if you try to keep a session running longer than 90 minutes that is virtual, you'll kill people. And so our view is we break up any virtual content into 90-minute max chunks with breaks in between. And so if you're going to do that, the two things happen. The content tends to get diminished a bit, reduced, dumbed down. Dumbed down is probably not the right level, but simplified, if you will. There's some things that are typically taken out. And because you have to do it in chunks, you end up taking a little bit longer to deliver the same learning outcome, which is what people are looking for. Meetings work in a similar fashion. You can't, think about sitting in a webinar for 8 hours, you'd be brain dead. So to run an effective meeting where there's 200 people, whereas most executives know how to do that today because they've done it. Running it virtually, you have to change the way you would deliver and run that meeting to be effective in a virtual world, or it won't work.
Absolutely. And when you have a lot of type A personalities, high energy people that are typically the people involved in the roles that we're training for, having them have to sit still and do stuff that way without the level of interaction you get face to face is a challenge. I know I did the first, it was 9 hours of straight training a week ago. And I'll tell you, I was brain dead at the end of it. It was insane.
Oh yeah. Delivering training or running a meeting virtually is far more taxing on the facilitator than doing it face to face. It's really, really demanding.
Absolutely. And I was actually a participant in this one, but I agree, like the delivery is, and I think you almost need to pair up too. You need someone who's managing kind of the chat and the stuff going on for the interaction, because the person presenting in that is having to pay attention to that material. And if you have too many distractions, it can actually derail.
It's pretty hard to type, listen, and talk all at the same time, huh?
Highly inefficient.
You can probably fake it for a little bit, but it's challenging. Yeah,
absolutely. So one thing I like to ask all our guests here, we can see your bike, you're an avid cyclist and that you're obviously in great shape. What are some of your high performance success habits that allow you to, one, stay healthy and maintain the energy that you need to perform at a high level all the time?
Well, how well I do that, I guess, is debatable, but my philosophy, I think, is summed up. People talk about trying to have a balance, and we all know that that's pretty tough to achieve in the real world. You get busy and life gets out of balance. It just does. But even when things are out of balance, my view is you actually have to prioritize things other than work as being important. So in my case, getting exercise is important. Taking content in, reading, is always something that matters to me. So I read every morning. It's one of the first things I do while I have coffee, and I try to figure out what's going on in the world. I read, as you can see behind me, both fiction and nonfiction. I have a thirst for knowledge. But then just beyond that, just being part of not just letting go of your personal world. So staying connected to family and friends and colleagues in an interpersonal way matters. The hard part is figuring out how do you juggle all of those somewhat competing priorities. But like anything, if you commit to it, you can make it work. My view is you actually have to commit to it and allow time in a schedule so that you can do all the things that ultimately tend to correlate with success. And in my view of the world, all those things tend to matter. It doesn't do any good if you're wildly successful in business if you blow up your whole personal life, in my view.
Absolutely. And I find, to your point, what you schedule demonstrates what you prioritize, and then you're making the deliberate effort to focus in those areas. You're doing the deliberate practice needed to, achieve those results while feeling that sense of well-roundedness. I think the idea of balance, I talked about this on a earlier podcast, if we take, literally a balance beam, where there's a fulcrum in the middle, it balances when it's this, when it's equal weight. But if we simplify it by personal life and business, we know that they're never in balance. Like there's going to be times where it's year end or something in business where the weight of what needs to be done in business is greater than, say, personal. Or if there's, a family emergency or health or something, the weight is heavier over there. And the interesting thing with balance, and I feel like Sheldon Cooper from Big Bang Theory here, the whole concept is when the weight goes over here, if we change the name of fulcrum to focus, if we just shift our focus where the weight is, it actually balances out things. But then as the weight comes off, you have to shift back. So we're always kind of managing priorities because there's the scheduling and being deliberate, but there's also the having to adapt to current realities and the situation we're in right now, and physical distancing and doing business that is in different ways changes obviously the focus and priorities.
Well said.
Awesome. Any last words of wisdom, thoughts at this unprecedented time in history that you'd want to share with the audience, and things that you're looking at and paying attention to right now?
This is a period of time that none of us have been through before. So, no one, I don't think, maybe some people predicted this would happen. I never did. So you find yourself where you can't get on an airplane. You can't see people that you want to see. We're stuck in our homes and being told to stay there. And we think that we're going to get let loose at some point in the next month or two, but maybe we will and maybe we won't. So I don't know that I have any magic silver bullet other than I stay positive. I do what I'm setting out to do as best I can, given the circumstances. I reach out to people that I care about, and I'm trying to the extent possible engage with businesses that have a similar mindset, knowing that this will change. I think what we learned in 2008 and 2009 is worth repeating here, is that those businesses that figured out how to invest time, effort, money, whatever they could do in the more difficult times, did far better coming out of the recession than those that ended up in a bunker mentality and just slashed and burned. And in some cases, if you're in the hospitality industry, you don't really have a choice, right? There is no business. Or if you're running an airline, traffic was down by 95%. So, but there's lots of people that are in between, and there is an opportunity to use these more difficult times to fine tune the business and to get it set for success when things start to get put back on a path to normal, or maybe it's a new normal. I don't know, but I mean, this can't continue. It can't, and it won't. So
it will come to an end, or a different conclusion here.
It has to. Yeah, I think we all understand that.
Well, and I'm glad, as we're concluding, that we talked about what to do, because we know in any economic downturn, and this is going to be a major financial hit, but there's a number of companies that are doing well, and it's the decisions that people are making right now that are really going to shape the momentum and trajectory coming out of this, because after any economic downturn is a major, and the more profound the downturn, the more profound the recovery and rebound. And, if people are looking at ways to maintain or grow revenues, or at least position themselves at this stage, they're going to be in a way better position, and there's likely going to be less competition. It's a sad reality, because there's going to be some companies that will not survive this. We heard, unless you had reserves and capacity, there was a lot of people that didn't. That's going to hurt. But
even a big place like Neiman Marcus, they announced over the weekend they were done. A long-term successful retailer.
Done. Well, and we saw the number of CEOs that quit, either just before this or at the early stage. It's going to be tough, but we know a number of, companies and clients that we're dealing with who are doing exceptionally well. And
we do too. We do.
We're fortunate that, our businesses are in the management consulting field because of, some of the clients that, Mentor deals with, and, just being in long enough and the strength of a network, we're persevering through it. But there's a lot of people who are in the mid-market that are just getting decimated. So
in some cases it's mixed. I talked to a client yesterday. It's a combination of an investment bank and a high net worth asset management business. And so the asset management business is an annuity business, and they're doing reasonably well.
Yes.
The investment banking business is DOA for the time being. No deals are getting done and won't until this reemerges. But when it comes back, there'll be a ton of M&A activity. So
a ton. And I think there's going to be a lot of good deals. So I think that positioning and that, and I know you and I off camera and the things that are going on behind the scenes, there's a lot of potential there, to really look at the opportunities and not just a problem, and be part of the solution.
Indeed.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much for your time today, Dan.
It's been my privilege to be on here. So thanks for inviting me, and hopefully people will find something that they can learn from our conversation.
Absolutely. Well, thank you very much, Hop Nation. We'll see you next week.